well. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. The second episode of Disrupt Your Now with my co-host, Rachel Garrett Mercer. If y'all watched last week, you found out that I had split Tuesday night off from the Thursday night show. So Thursday is still Adaptable Entrepreneurs. Tuesday is Disrupt Your Now. And so our guest for tonight is Jen Ballou, who is the founder of A Joyful Life with Jennifer, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I was so afraid I got that wrong.
It's all good.
All right, so introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about your background.
Sounds good. First of all, thank you, ladies, for having me this evening. It's really an honor to spend some time with you. My name is Jen Ballou, and like Lisa said, I'm the founder of A Joyful Life with Jennifer, which really helps women, veterans, and military families primarily navigate life changes while living a whole and joyful life. And I do that in 3 different ways. I'm a certified professional life coach. I'm also a registered yoga teacher and a speaker. I kind of have a personal story that sort of led me to where I am today. So that's what my business is all about. I'm a retired Army veteran. I served in the Army for 21 years, almost 21 years.
Wow.
And I'm also a military spouse.
I love that, the topic tonight, we're going to talk about resilience. And I love that you set up the resilience program was it Fort Bragg?
Yeah, I started at Fort Bragg and then I ended up at the Pentagon working in Washington,
gosh, I didn't know that.
No. Yeah, it was kind of weird.
The expert on resilience. And what a great time to be talking about that in the middle of all this shutdown and everything.
For sure. Yeah. The stuff that I learned throughout like the last 5 years or so of my Army service while teaching resilience has really like even just helped me personally during these times that none of us saw coming.
Yeah, it's crazy. Do you want to share any about your personal story to let people know kind of how you got into this?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, the reason I sort of say I help people navigate life changes is because we all either have experienced some sort of big life change or more than likely we're going to, right? Yeah. Back in 2010, I experienced a pretty significant traumatic life experience. Actually, I was serving in the Army, as was my husband. We were both on combat deployments to Afghanistan. Eddie was almost at the end of his deployment, and I was at the beginning of mine. And late one evening, I was notified that he had been, he stepped on an IED. And when I was notified, he was injured, he was in surgery, he had been evacuated to the hospital. So I was flown to where he was because we were in 2 different places. And when I got there, he was no longer alive. And
that's so devastating.
As you can imagine, everything changed. Things that were important just really kind of no longer were. And it just sort of sent my life path in a completely different direction.
And y'all had 2 small children, right?
Yes, ma'am. So at the time, my son Eddie was 2 and my daughter was 10 or 11. Wow. And so, yeah, there were just so many other things that kind of came along with it because I came home and my daughter understood, but my little guy, he was just happy mommy was home, right? Like he didn't understand. And then I didn't go back to Afghanistan with my company. I was a first sergeant at the time. And so all of this hard work that we had done leading up to this deployment, like I was almost grieving the loss of my team as well.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. So lots of changes all in succession too. Yeah.
So many changes and change that has just, followed. I often say maybe people can't relate to such a big traumatic experience like mine, but again, we all have things that we perceive as like a big change that can just knock us down. And it's really just how we respond to those changes that is really what makes a difference.
A lot of people don't realize that good changes are just as stressful as bad changes, like getting married, having a baby and all that, building a house, all of those things, even though they're happy and good, starting a business, Rachel.
Right.
All of those things, I think that when people do find themselves struggling during those times, they feel guilty or confused or whatever, because they feel like, why am I feeling like this? This is a good thing. Do you find
I love that you mentioned that, because that is exactly right. It's not about things that we perceive only as negative. There are, the birth of a child, a marriage, like you said, all of these things that are big changes within our life, they bring stress along with them that we have to navigate as well.
When Tom and I got married, we got married, bought a house, got married, moved to Florida, had a baby. I quit my job to move to Florida from Virginia, career job. So like 5 things all in a year. And Tom was 41 when we had our child. He had never had a child. So, I mean, I was like, woo, my head was like, I'm sure.
I resonate with that so much. It seems to be that kind of thing. It was the same thing, married, moved, diagnosis, all the kinds of things that come with that too. It just, life kind of comes in those waves and you can't anticipate much of it. You make all these plans, but then it's the mental side of it, the physical side of it. How does that stress manifest itself? I think that those are definitely all the pieces too.
Absolutely. And then here we are in the midst of COVID, right? Which everyone can relate to. Like, that's a huge life change none of us saw coming. We can all relate to. And then there's guilt, like you get all this extra time with your family, but I mean,
you get over nerve.
That might not be super enjoyable all the time. So yeah, for sure.
Do you have any specific advice, or have you seen, learn any specific lessons or anything in this time that you could share?
Specific to COVID?
Or just like anything, maybe surprise or something that, I know you've been doing this for a long time, but is there any tidbit that's kind of raised its head more so or new during this time?
Yeah, I think a big one is really just identifying the things in your day-to-day life that you can be grateful for, or that, make you feel good, because it's so easy for us to be focused on the negative things that are going on around us. It's called the confirmation bias. It's just what our brains do. It sticks to the not good stuff. And so really being intentional and setting time aside, it only takes a few minutes to identify 3 good things that happened in your life. Sometimes people like to share those things with each other at the dinner table, like as a family, and just kind of chat about it. But it really, it starts to train your mind to notice the good stuff too. I mean, the bad stuff is always going to be there. But for some reason, we have to look for the good stuff.
I know my theory, and it might be totally off, but my theory is that concentrating on the bad stuff is more exciting, but not in a good way, but it gets your adrenaline going where, when you're happy, people confuse happy with instead of being content, and if you're content, you're not all wound up inside. And that's why I just feel like people naturally gravitate to something that makes them feel more wound up or alive, even if it's a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And yoga, one of the philosophies is contentment is really that's what unlocks happiness or joy. If we can just be content with the way things are right now, which is so much easier said than done.
Yeah, I was in Clubhouse last weekend in a room. They were talking about gratitude. And one of the men said, every day before I get up, I try to go from my toes to my head and think that I'm grateful for my toe, my ankle, my foot, everything. And he said, but if I don't have time, if I'm whatever, don't want to go through my whole body, he said, I will at least do my belly button. He said, because if it weren't for my belly button, I would not be here. And I was like, oh my God, that's awesome.
That is so sweet. I've never heard that.
Thankful for our belly button, don't we?
That's new. I learned something new tonight. Like I've never even thought about that. So yeah, that's really good.
Are you on
I'm
Clubhouse?
sorry, Lisa, I'm interrupting you.
No, that's fine. What were you going to say, Rachel?
I was just going to ask Jen, is yoga something that you've always done, or was it something that you kind of picked up after these big life changes, or is it something that helped you through that? How did that come into your life?
That's such a great question. It's very new. I've sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Tried it here and there over the years, but it just never really resonated with me, which like I have my philosophy behind why that is now. But a couple of years ago, I was at a conference and there was a yoga, like a big group yoga session, and it like touched me to my soul.
Oh, wow.
I think it was just like alignment of the universe. The timing was a big part of it too. But it left me wanting more. I started a regular yoga practice, and then it's not all about the poses for me, especially. It's just more about like, yoga is about being a good person and living this good life. And it just really was in line with who I am and the message that I'm trying to share with the world.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
Or do you do yoga, Rachel?
So I'm kind of like you guys, where I've started bits and pieces of it over the years. I've done it off and on, but not really practice it consistently. I think that's where, I've done kickboxing, or I've done like Pilates, those kinds of things, but nothing consistent with yoga. It's something that's always intrigued me, but I've just never really done it in its fullest, I guess, really.
Yeah. And when I do it, I'm like, oh, I want to do yoga. And I feel like I would really like it. But then when I do it, I get really grumpy because I hate the repetitive poses. So instead of it being relaxing to me, I end up thinking, if I have to do this one more time, and I'm like, okay, I have to be doing the wrong yoga.
Well, and I was going to say that there's so many different kinds of yoga. So maybe you just haven't explored or experienced the one that would work best for you.
Yeah. So, and it's funny that we're talking about that, because over the past couple months, I've been thinking I really need to give yoga a try again.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, when I'm going, when I'm holding, I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm supposed to be feeling like this.
Well, coincidentally, I'm tossing around the idea of trying some online teaching, like to see if there's interest. So if I do, I'll let you ladies know, and you can come to one of my classes.
Let us know.
That would be great. I have a friend that does that, and she has had so much success. With everything the past couple of years, like COVID and everything like that. So it's a really fun. I would love it.
Well, you have a fan on here, Vanessa. Said,
hey, Vanessa.
So wise. She's truly amazing.
Oh,
that's really sweet. Nice. And then my friend Amy, I don't know if you know Amy Timar, she's also a veteran. She said she loves yoga, and it's helped her and her kids and even grandkids. And I have to say, last night, Amy and I were on Clubhouse for like 2 hours. And she's on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. And before we started talking, at the beginning, she's like, I need to do my workout. And then she messaged me later, and she's like, I did it. She even did it after we'd been on Clubhouse for 2 hours.
Good for her.
She said she likes
Bikram yoga, hot yoga.
Oh, only 2 of each pose. Okay, I need to try that, Amy. Then.
Yeah.
Maybe I can handle 2, but
it was overwhelming.
Yeah. Did you have any other questions? Anything else you wanted to ask her about that, Rachel?
No, I mean, really, that was it. I know that it's such yoga can be such a unique thing. I know we were kind of mentioning that you're saying different kinds for different people and that kind of thing. I just think it's having that physical release when you're going through something stressful for me has been important. It's not necessarily been through yoga, but it's been walking or running, finding that physical movement just to kind of work through my body, just because I know that whenever I have a change in my life, I internalize it, and then it manifests itself in a physical aspect. So that's kind of been my story. So I was very interested in how your experience with yoga was.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. Again, I think just being open to trying something new, and it's really great for the physical body, but it's so good for like the soul and the mental body as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. Well, back to resilience, I think kind of in line with what I said a few minutes ago about people not understanding the difference in being content and being happy. Because I think a lot of people think if you're happy, you're supposed to be like this. And they don't realize life is not, you can be happy without being all laughing and smiling. And so I prefer to think of it as being more content. Or as I tell my husband, I'm happy with my station in life. I'm just, so that's kind of the way I look at it. But do you have any tips or anything that can help people? Because I really don't think that a lot of people understand what resilience even is.
Yeah. Well, let's start there. So resilience is bouncing back from some sort of adversity or change in your life instead of just breaking and falling apart.
Yeah.
In terms of any tips, something that kind of came to mind when you were speaking, and it's sort of going back to the yoga topic, but the topic of meditation, that is something that if you're willing to give it a try consistently, it can lead you, it'll guide you to being content. And when I say try meditation, I don't mean sitting on a pillow for 45 minutes chanting. Like, that's just not where you start. It could be as simple as, like Rachel said, she likes to go on walks, and it's unplugging from your phone and just like recognizing the things around you, the nature, the smell, like, just really focusing on being present. That's a form of meditation. And there's a lot of other ways, but if you can just give it a try, it can guide you to that contentment that we're talking about.
I'm like Rachel. I like active meditation, and I'll tell you, my way is mowing the grass. And of course, I can't do that anymore. But some people can do it. They call it in the zone. When they're running, I can't. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hate this. But mowing, I can mow for hours with a push mower. I just love it. And even though it's hard work, well, it's good for me, strength and cardio, and I'm doing something productive, but it's just something about it. My mind can totally unplug, and I feel so much better after I do it. But I also often come up with my best ideas when I'm doing it. I'm not even trying to, but because I'm not trying to, my mind is more open.
Absolutely. Something else that I would love to mention is the power of taking a few deep breaths. We hear these things all the time, but let's just take, for example, a mom who right now, because of COVID, is working from home and homeschooling her kid or kids at the same time. And I mean, there's really no getting around that every single day is going to be a little bit chaotic.
Yep.
And so when you feel like things are getting a little bit out of control, taking some deep breaths is letting your nervous system know it's okay, settle down. Like, that's a very easy, tangible tip that we can all use and benefit from.
And I think being mindful of it when you do it, because sometimes I will find myself, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to do that. But then I realize it's kind of like eating and not realizing you've been eating. I didn't really feel it. And I'll make myself slow down and do it again. Just try to be very conscious of even your lungs moving and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you could just inhale for 4 seconds, pause, exhale for 4 seconds, pause. Yeah, just be mindful of it. And I'd be willing to bet you'll feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I experienced that. If about 5 years ago, I had an incident in my life where I have been dealing with PTSD and really healing from PTSD. And that was one of this practicing mindfulness in general has been one of those things that I've kind of grown in, but it was my saving grace through all of that change and how my body and my brain were connecting and responding. I found that deep breaths, like you're saying, if it's an active meditation, connecting with nature, connecting with something tactile, that's been something that I've kind of carried with me. And I feel like resilience in my life, and I don't know how it is for you guys, or what you've seen, Jen, in coaching, but I find that when you go, or what I have found is when I've gone through something really hard. So 5 years ago, for example, when I was going through that really hard place, that it almost prepares you then to be more resilient for the next time and have the tools. And so that's where I feel like I'd love to ask you, or what kind of tools are you helping people with, or what kind of tools can you point people to really help them find a way to be resilient, even if they've never tried it before?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's not like a quick answer there, I don't think. But one of the things that we've already kind of talked about is gratitude or optimism. Like my teacher, Dr. Karen Rivich, who taught me all about resilience, she works for the University of Pennsylvania. She always says that optimism is the engine of gratitude. I mean, the engine of resilience, sorry, optimism is the engine of resilience. So really focusing on being optimistic and grateful for the things in your life, big and or small, is a huge way to do that. Another one that comes to mind is the power of connection, so it's kind of tough right now because we're really not getting that face-to-face connection with a lot of people like we typically do. But technology can help us out with that. But really, like, making a little extra effort to stay connected to, even if it's just that one person. I'm not talking about your friends on Facebook, like that one or three people who you really love and care about, and getting on FaceTime with them or a Zoom call, and just sharing about your day. That connection is another tip that I would say really helps build your resilience.
That's amazing. I love that. The connection piece is really awesome.
Yeah, I like that too. And remembering and trying to celebrate the small things in life that we take for granted,
Yeah.
One thing, and this is not a small thing, but one thing that we did this past spring, my husband is a Vietnam veteran, and of course, they never got the welcome home that they deserved. And in 2025 is the 50th year commemoration of it. So they have these pins. They have all these pinning ceremonies that Vietnam veterans can go to and be welcomed home and get pinned with this commemorative pin. But Tom had not done it yet, and so I actually ordered one through the Vietnam War Commemoration Commission, and I'm gonna cry. But we did it on Zoom. I'm sorry.
Crying is not a bad thing.
I know. We did it on Zoom, and we had family all over the country on there. And the reason I'm crying is because he cried. He said, "This is the sweetest thing anybody has ever done for me."
Oh, I love that, Lisa. That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that with
you're
us.
welcome. I'm such a crier. That's not a small thing, but any just small things that people can think of to share with their families, and or just pick up the phone. How are you? Instead of texting, pick up the phone. Or if you can't call, one of the things that I've started doing is sending audio messages instead of text messages.
Oh, I love that.
Or a video message. You can do that through, through your text messaging app or through Facebook Messenger or anything. So either thing like that. And that way, even if you're not actively talking with the person, they feel more connected.
I love those ideas.
And I would say this past year, that's really how my dad and I too were both very busy entrepreneurs. I mean, we're all kind of really doing those kinds of things. And that's one of the only ways that we get to connect on a daily basis. And it has made such a difference, because we would go, days without texting or messaging and things like that, because we'd get so busy and bogged down in our own stuff. So taking a minute just to say something out loud too, I feel like is a release in and of itself, and a great way to just connect. Yeah.
And how special does the person that's receiving it feel, right?
That's good. Yeah. And oftentimes, days or weeks can go by and you don't even realize that you haven't reached out, that you haven't spoken with people. So
yeah, it's actually like, I need to call my mom when we get off of this. Like, my mom and I don't like, we text all the time, but
yeah,
geez, we need to talk.
yeah. I know. I was just thinking about my kids. Well, my daughter lives in Atlanta, my son in Chicago, and we text a lot too. But I can't remember. It's probably been at least a week since I've spoken with either one of them. So yeah, we all need to call somebody when we get off.
Yes, let's do it.
What are some of the things that through the resilience programs that you set up for the military? What are some of the things that you did through that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was really about, well, when I was at Fort Bragg, it was really teaching leaders the importance of this program and how it could benefit their soldiers. And then when I moved to Washington, D.C., it was more like, you know, monitoring the program for the entire world, and working closely with, at the time we were working with the University of Pennsylvania. They're the ones that created the curriculum that we were teaching.
Okay.
But I did a lot of.
The program is actually a teaching thing, like it's teaching coping mechanisms. It's not like an ongoing. It's not like an ongoing resource that's there, or how does it work?
Yeah, so there are resources as well. I mean, there's a lot that encompasses, or that the program encompasses. However, the foundation is teaching skills to people that when they actively practice them, like, it's scientifically proven that they can build and enhance their resilience. And I mean, it's no secret, like, a perfect sort of topic is like the veteran suicide rate. You know, one of the huge messages of the program is asking for help as a sign of strength. And for some reason, not just for veterans, but people in general, like, that doesn't resonate with us. We feel like we're Superman or Superwoman if we don't ask for help for whatever. I don't know why, but asking for help takes so much strength.
It does. My grandfather killed himself when I was 5, and nobody had any idea it was coming. You know, no, nothing. We're kind of left with, and then my grandmother tried to 3 years later, but she didn't succeed. She actually lived for like 30 more years or something. But
wow.
Yeah, but you're right. And people really do want to help, but I think that people are embarrassed, or they feel weak. And some people may feel like nobody will believe them as well. I'm not sure.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, I can't read your mind.
Right.
You know, I can't, I don't know what you're thinking. And so, like, you have a personal responsibility to share when you're struggling with somebody. Like, it doesn't have to be me, but to share with somebody so that they do have the opportunity to help you and lead you in a direction.
That's a great point. Personal responsibility, because there's so many people that love you and care for you, and all of those people are affected if you make that decision.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lifelong journey.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just said it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah. So tell us about some of the life coaching stuff. I've really been curious about that over the years.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I didn't even know life coaching was a thing. After I retired from the Army, the job that I initially started in just really didn't work out. And I started researching like what I could do that still gave me that sense of like connection and that I could help people, and life coaching popped up, and I'm like, this is a thing. I can't even believe it. And of course, there's so many different types of coaches. The program that I went through really focuses on helping people understand the energy that they are living in the moment. So there's 7 different levels of energy, and like, is how you're reacting in any given situation, is that serving you? And if it's not, let's talk about strategies that you can implement for yourself that will lead you to handling these situations a little bit better. But it's also just stuff like, communication, self-care is a big topic that I work with women on, especially is, just you've got to prioritize yourself. You can't continue to pour from an empty cup. And so let's figure out some small steps that you can take in the direction of living a more well life for yourself.
Yeah. What are the energies?
That's like a whole nother interview that we need to do.
Forever, or maybe an example of 2 of them.
Yeah. So there's 7 levels of energy, and they're kind of categorized in 2 different ways. Either anabolic, which we say is like, it's fueling, it's growth oriented, you feel good. Catabolic is draining. Like, it might work for you in the now, but you can't operate from a catabolic level of energy forever. It's just going to suck the life out of you. But an example would be, if a stressful situation happens, so I'm driving down the road and somebody cuts me off, and I right away flick them off or lay on my horn or start yelling obscenities. Not that I would ever do any of those things, but if I did,
I know somebody.
That would be level 2 energy, which is like anger, outwardly like fighting, And so I'm the only one that can say if that is serving me or not. But more than likely it's not, And so that's just sort of an example of like, this is how I'm showing up in this circumstance. And I probably don't want to be reacting that way. We choose how we react. We like to say we don't, but we actually have a choice of how we react to every single situation. And so sometimes just understanding how we're showing up and then talking about how we want to show up will lead us exactly to where we want to go.
That's amazing.
Yeah. The other thing about like your example with the car is that when we remind ourselves that we are in control of making this choice, we also need to remind ourselves that the choice we make affects other people. Like, if I'm with somebody who gets really angry when they're driving, I just get like this.
Yeah.
And so even if it makes you feel better to, to yell or whatever, if you think about how it affects the other people around you, but then I need to figure out how to deal with that too, so that I don't let that affect me.
Right. And so that would be another thing. Like, let's talk about how you can have a conversation with this person in your life that you care about, that is acting in this way that is negatively affecting you. And so if you are my client, we might even do something as simple as like role playing the conversation, and, you thinking like how I might react and talking through different ways of responding. Because a lot of times people don't want confrontation, and so they hold those like little conversations in, and then we've probably all been there where eventually you just explode, and it's not even about what you're exploding about. It's all about all this stuff you've been holding on to for all this time.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I think that's such an easy thing to do. It seems like it's the easy way out, but in the long run, it's not. It's not the easy way, because then you just make things so much worse for yourself, internally, physically, mentally, all of that kind of stuff. It just makes it worse in the long run.
Yeah, it does. It does.
So let's talk about, for entrepreneurs specifically, have you done much coaching of like small business owners or entrepreneurs? Have you seen like any different things that you've had to deal with them than other people?
That's a great question, Lisa. I've done a little bit of coaching with small business owners, but primarily not. Primarily, it's just been individual women, for the most part, either veterans or family members. But the ones I did some coaching for a small business. It's a real estate company here in Central Texas. And it's really interesting because I find that there's not much of a difference in the stuff that like business owners or entrepreneurs are dealing with or struggling with versus like if my client is like a woman veteran. We're all people kind of like holding the same or similar stuff on our shoulders.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, you know, you might be worried about cash flow, worried about employees, worried about losing a client, getting a client, but those things all translate over to the same kind of things for people who are employees and not business owners.
Right. Like, how are you dealing with that stress? How are you handling that stress? Are you reacting where you're like yelling at your employees or, you know, going home? More than likely, you're going home and taking it out on your family. And so those relationships are suffering. So it's really like all the same.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me that you basically have these three parts, but they work together so well: the yoga, the life coach, and the resilience.
Yeah. Yeah. It didn't really, like, I didn't plan it that way. I started out like, I'm going to start this small business and I'm going to be a life coach. But it's just sort of like gone in this direction. And I feel really good that they all sort of work together. And based on the person or people that I'm dealing with or working with, you know, another thing I like to say is there's no cookie cutter answer. And so it's my job to meet you where you are and help you figure out like what next steps do you want to take? And then let's work on it together.
Have you had any times in your own business that you have felt like frustrated or stuck and just how did you get through that? And because one of my missions is to try to help people stop saying, I'm going to do it tomorrow or a week from now or a year from now, 5 years from now. That's why the name of the show is Disrupt Your Now. You know, go and make some of these changes. So have you had any times that you've had to disrupt your own self in your business to get to the next level or to get unstuck?
Yeah, I think for me, the first thing that comes to mind is just this work-life balance. So, you know, I have these boundaries in place for like when I'm going to dedicate time to my business and when I'm going to dedicate time to my family. And it's not always black and white. And so a lot of times, like as a mom, I have a young child and I'm the wife of a soldier who's gone a lot. It's like, man, I feel like I have to make the choice between my family or my business. And so I really had to just do some reflecting and decide, you know, this is the way it's going to be. This is what's working for me right now. And I can't keep wishing that things are going to be different. Either I'm going to make them different or I'm not.
Wow.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people spend too much time wishing or regretting or whatever, and they never really act on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So like setting boundaries is another big one that, again, it's so applicable to the business world, to entrepreneurs, but also in our personal lives. Like we need to really think through the boundaries that we say we're going to set and then identify like how are we going to uphold those boundaries? What happens when something is pushing on that boundary? What am I going to do? And then do it.
Yeah.
That's something that I struggle with right now, Jen, building my business. You know, I'm 6 months in, and that's creating like the right kinds of boundaries between not sitting on the couch on my laptop when my husband's home from work and continuing to work and that kind of thing, and not having that relationship be as strong as it could be too, because my mind is constantly on the other things that I need to get done. And are there enough hours in the day and that kind of thing? That's something that I'm working through as a business owner and an entrepreneur right now. It's a huge thing that I've got to figure out. And like like you said, if it's pushing on that boundary, how do I set that and how do I make it work for me? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. This goes back to our conversation sort of before we started recording about the workshop with values.
Yeah.
So knowing your core values, who you are at your core is so important. You know, if one of my core values is family, but I'm, you know, working until 10 o'clock every night, one of my core values is not family. Like, let's just
Right.
be honest. Like, I want it to, but it's not. So living your life in alignment with your core values is really, really helpful, but you've got to identify them first.
That's amazing. That's incredibly helpful. Yeah.
It is. And it seems like such a basic thing, doesn't it, Rachel?
It does. Yeah.
We don't really do it. So like sit down, and I guess if needed, sit down and write down what our values are. And
yeah, I have my clients write down the value, identify the values, and then define what they mean to you. Because what family means to me might not be what family means to you. And so define what it is, and then, you know, we'll take it further later. But it's tough for some people. It's really tough because they want to think that their values are one thing, but they might not be.
Yeah. Not living it out that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we're not living it out that way, we have to ask ourselves, is that really one of my core values? And if I do really want it to be, why am I not treating it that way? Those are hard self-critical questions.
Yeah. And so sometimes it's helpful to work with somebody like a coach who's not biased and can really just sort of like kind of guide you in the direction of figuring out what they are and offering, you know, suggestions or tools on things that you can do to implement or put into action when things might not be going as you plan or hope.
So if you're working with someone as their life coach, how does that usually work? Like how many sessions, or I assume it varies widely, but.
Yeah, actually, I really try to keep it to when I talk to somebody and we decide that we're a good fit for each other, we agree on a minimum of 12 sessions, which is once a week for 12 weeks. And the reason I feel really strongly about that is because change that's going to be sustainable doesn't happen in like 1 or 2 weeks. Like it just doesn't. And more often than not, stuff kind of comes up that the client didn't really think we were going to work on initially. So it's usually 12 weeks. And a lot of times the client ends up wanting to work together longer than that.
That's great. Yeah, because if you want to, even if it's something as simple as a diet or exercise, obviously it takes a while to change those habits and work on your responses to things.
Right. And just like with the example of diet, I mean, I just think it's so important to work with somebody that the changes are going to be sustainable. So we're not going to go, and I'm not a diet coach, but this is like a good example. We're not going to go from you eating 5,000 calories a day to 1,000 calories a day. Like you're not going to sustain that. So let's make small changes that are consistent, and it's going to lead to amazing things.
Yeah. That's so true, Rachel. A bunch of
consistency.
Small things consistently.
Yes, consistency. Yes, absolutely.
So tell everybody how they can contact you or find out more about you, Jen.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, just Jennifer Ballou, on Instagram and Facebook, Coach Jennifer Ballou. And then my website is jenniferballou.com. So I'm pretty easy to find. Just type in Jennifer Ballou and I'll come up. Ballou is Ballou. I think it's on the screen, but just in case.
Yeah. But no, that's great because you never know, somebody might be listening and not.
True.
So
true.
Thank you so much for joining me and Rachel tonight.
Yes, it was so great to talk to you, ladies.
It was a pleasure. Same.
Thanks a lot. And everybody, I will be here Thursday night, and I'm not going to say who my guest is yet because I haven't posted it, but I'll post it in the morning. Thanks for joining us, and I will see y'all Thursday. Rachel will see y'all next Tuesday. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.